Hey guys, it's Austin back today with another YouTube video. As I mentioned in my previous video about the when I went down to the At Home in Florida to get the Colossal Santa and Miss Claus, I said then I wanted to make at least a video on this inflatable, even if it was not done in the most traditional method that I normally film my reviews in. And it's like I said, I probably would just, because I mean, I owe it to my subscribers and my viewers at least. If I say I'm going to do something, I want to follow through with it because I know in the past I've kind of let stuff slip my mind, whether it be due to time, work, or other circumstances. And this is just an inflatable that I really wanted to get a review out of because I feel like it has such a significance in this year's at-home lineup. I think it deserves its own video. But anyways, today we have the 20-foot tall LED head turning cat from At Home. And to a lot of people who have decorated and made content over the past few years, or even just people who are fans of inflatables, this might ring a bell to some people because this is not the first iteration of this inflatable. Back in about the mid 2000s, Hallmark or Slimmer released a version of this called the two-story head turning cat. And I will admit, this is a design that I always had kind of had just, I was obsessed with watching videos on it. And I know several different YouTubers and even decorators over the past few years, they've had at least some iteration of that cat. And that was the one who started it all, who started this whole, if you want to call it a lineage of these inflatables that are just the same concept, but just done slightly differently with different design methods or like for different like lighting components and such. But anyway, there have been a few different companies to attempt this. I mean, we obviously have the original with Hallmark or Slimmer. Then I think a few years down the line, there was a company called, I think it's B2B Goods, I think, that had, or at least their take on that cat. And it's almost identical to the two-story cat, albeit it does have a few different parts to it. I think the eyes are not like that beady red with the green on them. And I think it's more like got a bit more of a different like face on it. It's got the same idea, but it's just a different facial expression. And I think it uses for the most part the same fan and the same lighting components it does. And I obviously realized that Hallmark or Slimmer has they've redesigned the 20-foot tall head turning cat, at least in their own way, although the one that they currently sell now on their website is a 17-foot design, but it has the blinking eye feature with no teeter-totter motors or any kind of like actual practical animation. It's mostly just like a lighting component that's making the animation go on and off. And then you have, I think that one also has like the micro LED lights all around its head as well, which is different. And I'm glad that they are trying to at least revolutionize and change the way they did that design originally. But to me, this is the quintessential Halloween inflatable, something that I've seen so many collectors have in the past. And just whenever I saw that At Home was releasing this among their Halloween inflatables this year, I knew I had to pick it up. Even though I originally wasn't going to pick it up, I knew if I was going to get that 20-foot witch, I definitely had to pick this one up because those two just make too much sense together. But anyways, many of the design elements from that original Hallmark or Slimmer cat, they carry over into this one, such as that just the maniacal Cheshire cat like grin with the sharp razor sharp teeth, and then you have the dead-eyed, just straight up like just glaring eyes that's looking down like it's ready to pounce and ready to target its prey, whether that be a mouse, a rodent, or whatever it's going after. You got the pointy ears that have a nice red accent to like its earlobes, as well as like the button red nose, which kind of reminds me a little bit of like a clown nose, albeit I think on the cat where the whiskers are pointing out, I think it works just fine because I think it has like that, feline nose with like the point on it, and then like the two nostril holes that show like it has like, that just the general like nose that a feline, a cat, or any, like, whatever you classify a cat as would have. And it also has on the very back like that pointed up straight up tail as well. So it also has the pointy like claws down here. And it's kind of like Inflo was mentioning in his display, I mean, in his review of it, where I feel like they did a good job of like doing the claws as actual inflatable pieces and not just doing like little felt pieces like what they've done on some of those Jimmy cats in the past. But which brings me to another point. I mean, honestly, as much as Jimmy has really been pushing to get 20-foot designs out, you would think that the At Home may go with Jimmy. Well, that's not the case. This one is actually not Jimmy. This one is done by a company I think called Rainbow Village. And overall, at least from where I've had it out in my yard the past few nights, which by the way, it's currently up in my display, and that's where we'll kind of get to the review part of this whole thing after we get around the tour of the box and I kind of get done talking about just what all the thoughts that I want to bring up in the beginning. But anyway, from at least where I've seen it out in my yard, I think it looks very good, albeit I do suggest including like a second light feature with it because those LEDs on it are pretty weak, and you definitely want to have something to accompany the lights at night because otherwise you will lose the back of the inflatable in the dark at night. So I definitely would suggest, just as a side note, using a floodlight bulb if you have one on this whenever you're displaying it next to other inflatables, as well as just the fact a lot of AtHome's colossal designs, especially from the knockoffs like Airflows and now with this Rainbow Village head turning cat, they've all been made with like those really just, well, I'll say this. Some of the LEDs are better than others. I will say some of the ones on like at least on this one, I think where it has like that just that pure black fabric and the fact that it's also boom bounce, I think it just really takes away any effect that the LEDs would have otherwise. And then you've got that freaking tree inflatable I talked about in my witch review, and I can't remember if I got a close-up of that at the one down in Florida, but that one, I don't know why that inflatable has LEDs. There is no way, especially it being a Jimmy, that inflatable deserved to have C7s. There's no way that that tree should have had LEDs. And I know that's been a talking point as to people boycotting it and not buying it. As you all know from my witch review, I already said I wasn't going to get it. It doesn't fit my display. I've already got other tree designs that I much prefer to it. And just in general, I think this and the Witch were probably the two best colossal designs for Halloween that AtHome has done in a while. But anyway, let's cut to the box, the tour around the box. Okay, so starting out with the front of the box, we do have the cat like in a midday setting, kind of as the sun's going down, and you can start to see like where the LEDs does light up, at least the parts of the inflatable that do light up well with the LEDs. That's mainly confined to the face of like the grin, the eyes, the nose, and then you do get some of like the ears, but other than those, nothing else really lights up that well. And you do get like a slight fade down there. I don't know if you can see like right down here next to its neck, like where the leg is, there is also a bit of a slight LED as well. But other than those areas, really the back is pretty much non-existent. You can't see nothing with the back with just the LEDs. And then you've got here Halloween 20-foot tall LED cat with animated head, inflatable moving head, fan, tether, stakes included, self-inflates in seconds for indoor outdoor use, which for anybody who tries to inflate this indoor, you probably would have to have something about the size of a circus tent or a freaking factory warehouse. I don't know how you would inflate this indoors, but if you have a way of doing that, I would highly love to see a photo or a video of this in an indoor setting because it would truly amaze me as tall as this thing is, if you could get that somewhere indoors. Or let's see here, pull it a little closer. Then you got ETL, US, Interfec, LED, animated, and it lights up. Then you got the store finder number, which was H142, and then its price, which, like I said, take as you will. I mean, it's a 20-foot inflatable, but it also includes like the animation and, in my opinion, a pretty high-quality fan. Side looks just about the same as the front. Really the render photos all look just about the same. Up here you do have a troubleshooting checklist, which I did think was a little bit interesting because I haven't seen really many other AtHome inflatables include this. If your inflatable's not inflating, the problem may be a list of many reasons, but I'm not going to go through that. And then also, interestingly enough, it does have like a step, kind of like, you know, you're pulling it out of the box and then you're pulling it up, like unfolding it in its fan, then a photo of it standing, how it's meant to be plugged in, and then as well like a tethering diagram on the back as well, and another tethering diagram. But in general, I've never seen any other company do that. Like I said, this is probably a first-time company for AtHome, so this definitely is different. So, I mean, it is kind of cool, though, to see, like, there's a colossal design with the actual instructions on the back of the box, like, not on, like, paper in a box. But this one was, like, an interesting note to bring up. Then you got this down here. Then you got a side-by-side comparison of a normal human being to the cat itself. lights, like I said. Then the side over here, just about the same as the front. Then on the top, you got like the clean looking like black background with the AtHome logo on it, which is something that I really kind of took interest in this year, because it looked like all the Colossal designs kind of were color coded, because this one had like a black, which looked very clean, and it kind of matches the color of the Inflatable, as well as the Witch had like a bit more of like a light purple accent, and then I think the Frankenstein had a bit of a like a lime greenish yellow one, which kind of matches its like skin color on its face and its hands. So I thought that was very interesting that AtHome took that approach this year. I think it definitely at least accents the box and makes it look a little bit more professional and neat, but still very nice. I love the design of this boxes that AtHome has done in a while. But anyway, let's cut to the review part of this video. Hey guys, now we're on to the actual review part of this video. I waited a little bit till like dusk in the evening. I had to run some errands, so unfortunately I wasn't able to get it out in much better daylight. But anyway, I want to try to get this review in so I can move on to the Halloween display, which if you hear the sound boxes or any of the stuff going on around in your peripheral like hearing, you could probably hear about everything going on right now. But I'm going to try to keep the camera down to not give any spoilers away, except for Colossal Rushmore where the cat's standing. But anyway, it's time for the grand reveal. I give you all the 2024 AtHome 20-foot tall head turning cat. And right away, that face just makes the biggest first impression of any inflatable I think that I have. It falls into the category of the Colossal. This thing looks absolutely menacing to a capital M. So I mean, right off the bat, you get that just glazed eye look, the ready to pounce teeth, and just the head turning just really perfectly. The turning head mechanism just really just overall enhances that look already. So I mean, I'm definitely glad that AtHome made a version of this, and I just cannot believe the sight lines and the difference it's made in my Colossal Rushmore section of my yard this year. Excuse me. Starting now, we got the face up here, which I was just talking about. Very nice menacing look with that Cheshire cat style grin. And since I didn't mention it like in the actual unboxing, I do want to get to like the tether cords and the stakes. Right off the bat, the Colossal tether cord on this one is a bit more like parachute cord, which kind of reminds me a bit more of like the mid-sized Jimmy ones almost, or like the 12-foot Jimmy ones. It is a little bit thicker around than those, but overall I would definitely say that the Colossal rope on the Jimmy and the Airflows models are a lot stronger, and I hope that this will hold up over time, because I could definitely see in high winds this being a dry rot or potentially a snapping issue. And then down here we have these very interestingly colored like stakes. Now I know several different companies have their own variation of the Colossal stakes, and this is the Rainbow Village version of the Colossal stakes. They're very similar to like the Jimmy ones, but they are like a very, it's almost like a bit more of like a thinner hard plastic is what I like to kind of compare them to, and they're not like as thick around as like the Jimmy ones, or for even that matter the Airflows ones that are over here on the Witch. So that's another thing I'm kind of wondering, is would durability become an issue down the line? I'm surely hoping not, because I did pay a lot of money for this. And the staking carries over down here to the feet. Each foot has one tether attachment on it to perfectly hold the feet to the ground, which is very similar to the bottom staking like on the Airflows Colossals and like Jimmy's, where they have like the spiral stakes. So I will say that I do prefer this method a little bit more, just because I feel like they're a little bit more rock solid to the ground, whereas the spiral stakes in wind, they just come untwisted very easily. So definitely another good pro about this design. Let me get you an uphill view from the back up here on Colossal Rushmore. See here, that's what it looks like from the back, and you also have a good vantage point of my haunted house, my 18-foot Jack Skellington down there. And I also will mention that I do have a floodlight bulb on it. It's an LED floodlight, so as I mentioned in like just the breakdown before I got to the actual review, those LEDs underneath the belly and up in the tail, they do like pretty much next to nothing in terms of the illumination. So I'm definitely taking that advice that Infla mentioned in his review and running with that, because I think about anybody who wants this to be seen at night, it definitely needs a floodlight bulb, just because that black does not stand out with those weak LEDs. And I think it definitely is the piece that it needed to illuminate this better as well. And then moving on down here to the fan, which is kind of bit of a rarity in my displays, because normally you don't see fans on the base fans, and you do get to see the cheap fan ones, but not always on the base fans. But this one is in the rare position that it actually has a pull-out fan, an AH4, which is the most powerful pull-out fan that you can purchase, which is a step above the AH3 that Yard Inflatable sells in some of their bigger, like, Air Characters designs. And I will say this one does look pretty sturdy. And I do have it stuck down with saw staple. Also, thank you to Alex on that note as well in his review. It's been doing a good job holding the fan to the ground and making sure this does not tip over and twist its, like, inflation tube, which would be very detrimental to, like, its inflation time. And overall, I'd say this one might be the fastest Halloween inflatable in my display that inflates, aside from maybe my Ghoul Trio or my Red Dragon from Lowe's, as those both have YEF 200 fans. But this one is just about equivalent to the length of a YEF 200 fan and the power, so yeah, it definitely helps it inflate a lot quicker than your standard size fan. So I definitely am glad that this thing has a very sufficient fan, and a lot more than I can say for these cheapy, like, Airflows fans, even though those do hold pretty good air as well. But I think longevity wise, this will hold up a lot longer than an Airflows design will in terms of the inflation. Getting a better look down here from the underbelly, you can see those weak LEDs a little better. Like I said, they do pretty much next to nothing, and they're more or less just there, and you do see a glimpse of them at night, but really it's very little compared to the illumination this thing needs. So definitely get a secondary light to put on this thing. But that's just a shame that we couldn't have got a better lighting system, or at least something as good as the Airflows LEDs. Or maybe it just might be the fact that this thing has boom bounce fabric and it's black, I don't know. But anyway, lesson learned on the illumination part. And overall, that pretty much wraps up the overview of the 20-foot tall head turning cat. In general, it's a very good inflatable. Definitely creeping up the list of my favorite Colossal designs, along with this Witch over here, which is my other new Colossal this year. And like I said, this Freesome right here might be one of the best Halloween Colossal Freesomes that I've seen in any display so far. I know a lot of people like to group together, like, a lot of the Reapers, as well as, like, the Pumpkin Stack and the Pumpkin Reaper from AtHome last year. But right now, I think in terms of aesthetic, you can't beat this just overall. This reminds me of just like the retro classic monster section of my yard, because you have the Frankenstein, you have the black head turning cat. I mean, who does not know of the story of the black cat that a witch always has? And then you have its companion right over here to the right of it in my yard. So in general, I cannot be more happy with how this complements my classic monsters Colossal section of my yard this year, or Colossal Rushmore. But anyways, now time we get to the rating part of my review. Okay, first category will be price. This year at AtHome, this retailed for $210. It was the most expensive Halloween inflatable in their lineup. And I think in terms of just the aesthetic and the look of it, I think it definitely is the most menacing and the most scary AtHome Colossal this year. And I'd say by a long shot, it might be one of the better Colossals that AtHome has sold for Halloween up to this point, as you don't see many other animated Colossals, at least in its class. And while part of me does wish this was a Jimmy design, and I wish that we would stop straying away and go into all these knockoff designs, I will say that this is a very good contemporary to, like, the Jimmy and as well as the Airflows, which I've also become accustomed to buying as well. So in terms of price, I'd say I'd probably give it about an 8.5 out of 10, and it's for one reason and one reason only. We get that really good AH4 pull-out fan on the back of it, as well as the animation. Those are about the two categories that I'd lend the price to, because in terms of just the in general, like, lighting and the illumination, it's pretty trash. I gotta say it's probably the weakest, like, Colossal in terms of illumination. I'll also come up here and give it a bump and see, like, how good the inflation is. But it's pretty tight. Head's a little bit weaker because it's a more oscillating piece of the inflatable, although you do see some notable creasing down here on the legs, which I think that's just due to the fact that it has, like, one fan on it, which, I mean, it's just kind of I guess it's just part of the game with these inflatables. You don't really get many inflatables that have two fans on them, so that's that. But anyway, back to the rating. Then you got to go with design. In terms of design, I would say comparing this to, like, the B2B Goods cat, the Hamaker Slimmer cat, and the new Hamaker Slimmer cat that recently came out with, like, the micro LED lights, I would say I do prefer the face and just the aesthetic of this one's animation much to those. Although part of me still goes back to, like, that two-story cat, and it just, And to me, it's just like those red beady eyes with that green and like the orange on that tail, especially like those rings on it, I think definitely make it a lot more Halloweeny. And I think that those elements would have complemented the witch and the Frankenstein's accents a little better with that orange. So the part of me in terms of the design kind of does wish that we could have got a bit more color to this one, even though I think the red and the white definitely pop. And then I think also my other biggest complaint with design has to definitely be the lack of visibility in terms of the lighting on it, which is also another big red flag for this one. So in terms of the design, I'd probably have to knock this one down to about a 5 if I had to say. And I know on the surface that might seem a little bit low for as much praise as I was giving it on the price, but in general, this thing, there's just elements that hold it back, and there are also elements that just elevate it. So to me, I just think that, you know, saying this in terms of the design is like a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10 is a little bit of a stretch. But anyway, then I want to get on to the value. Basically, you're getting a colossal 20-foot inflatable. As Infla even said, you might be getting one that's 21 feet tall. And to me, it's just like, in terms of portion, I think you're getting a whole lot for what you're paying for, even with the extra $10 on there for the more powerful fan and the animation. So I think in terms of just in general value, I'd give that probably about a 9 out of 10, just because I feel like in terms of like what you're paying, you are getting a lot for what you're paying. The only thing I'd say that needs to be improved a little bit is the better illumination pieces I was mentioning. Aside from the illumination kind of not being up to par with some of the other colossals in my collection, I would say it's pretty good otherwise in terms of value. So I think I am going to stand on a 9 at value. And then at long last, the category that this thing shines the most in, the wow factor. And as you know, with all my colossal designs, it's always going to be a 10 out of 10. And this thing, I'd even almost bump it up to a 15 out of 10 with its animation. Everybody coming down the road is going to notice this thing as soon as they see the movement of its head, and just it gives it that more intimidating factor of it, just its face. I think it's definitely going to catch more people's eyes than say like a freestanding, even though I think alone just the size of the freestands that I think already catch people's eyes and always take people off guard. And they always just say like, you know, boy, oh boy, this has to be like some of the most expensive inflatables in your display. And yeah, they aren't really far off on that, although I do have a few more expensive designs in my display. I think as we can all attest to the ones that are loaded down with like special light effects and more powerful fans and like more animation points. I think that there's definitely other ones that are more expensive, but in general, this thing, it's a pretty good design, and I'm willing to pay the price that it had for it. So I think definitely in terms of wow factor, this thing is going to be easily a 10 out of 10. Anybody who drives by is going to notice it. So right up front, I think you're definitely going to get some eyes on this bad boy. Sorry, I got a bit of a cold, guys. I apologize. That's part of the reason I've also not uploaded this yet, because my voice has not been the greatest. I've been a little bit raspy and coughing since I got back up here in this cool Tennessee air. But anyway, let me total up the full rating. You got a 9, a 5, 8.5, and then what was the other? A 10, 9, an 8, an 8.5, and a 5. So that would be 13.5, 22.5. It'd be about a 32.5 on the rating scale. So if your AtHome does have this, or if you can find any more online that are not like being price gouged, I'd highly suggest picking this model up. It's definitely a very nice colossal, and it's a great statement piece to put out if you have other colossals around it, especially like the classic monster designs, as well as just any Black Reaper. I think even like my Gothic Cloaked Reaper would definitely be a good partner with this one, and even to some extent the Jack Skellington with its like red and black and white accents, because I think its palette matches this one perfectly. So just if you can find this thing a pairing partner, I'd definitely pick it up. Or even if this is just like your big statement piece, I'd highly recommend picking this up. But anyway, that's it for this review, guys. Comment, like, and subscribe. And next up is the Halloween display. See y'all then.